The technique of the flaming fist is a lost art. We work to rediscover it. I can no more teach you this than teach you to grow a horn from your head. All of my attempts thus far have failed. Today on the Comic Book Report, Robert Kirkman and Chris Samnee's Firepower Book 1. Stick around and check it out. How's it going, everyone? My name is Dominic, and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today we're taking a look at a newer Image Comics series. Of course, I'm talking about Firepower. And while I am so eager to dive into today's review, I do want to just shout out our channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're hoping to pick up a copy of this book or other comic book collected editions, I encourage you to check them out. You can use the link in my description, and you can even use my code, TheComicBookReport, at checkout to receive $2 off of your order. Please note, if you use my affiliate link or code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a fantastic way to support the channel. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's get started with our Firepower review. First, some quick facts about today's collection. The issues in this volume were written by Robert Kirkman and illustrated by Chris Samnee. The comics in this volume were published by Image Comics beginning in 2020. The volume itself collects Firepower, Prelude, and Firepower issues 1 through 12. Finally, this oversized hardcover edition comes with a nice sewn binding, glossy print paper stock, and comes in at 448 pages. At this time, I'd like to issue a brief spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the contents of today's collection and commenting on plot points throughout. You've been advised. Okay, and here's our first look at Robert Kirkman's Firepower, Book 1 hardcover. So this book came out from Image Comics, and I have to admit, it's been on my wish list for some time. I'm definitely a Robert Kirkman fan after reading Invincible, a handful of The Walking Dead, Oblivion's Song I've read some of, and so forth. This was definitely one that caught my eye. I thought the edition looked beautiful, and I've just been waiting to pick it up. I had a little bit of extra in my budget, so I went ahead and ordered from Organic Price Books. I'm so happy I did. The cover design is just gorgeous. Something to note right from the jump, there is no dust jacket with this collection. It's just the hardback book itself, which I thought was an interesting choice, but overall, with a cover this beautiful, it's hard to complain. Just look at that. Wow. And now that we're done with that, we'll go ahead and transition over to a quick look at the binding. It is sewn binding. Overall, I thought it was really well bound. It is kind of a squared off binding. It's not rounded whatsoever as far as the spine looks. But I had no real problems with my reading experience. I think it's holding together nicely. I hope it stays that way. But at any rate, just wanted to give a look to all the prospective collectors out there. And with that out of the way, we can jump right into the book itself. This book has some beautiful kind of red, fire-themed end pages. We have a beautiful cover page. And then we jump right into the prelude, basically. And I have to say, this book is set up really, really nice. So a couple things to note. The prelude is kind of a standalone graphic novel slash kind of prologue to the whole series. And after that, we jump right into the 12 issues of the book itself. I will say that the covers are saved for the back. So instead, how we note the jumping from point to point, this book's actually broken into 3 chapters. My guess is that it's basically the prelude graphic novel. Chapter 2 would have been Volume 1 of the comic run and trade paperback, so maybe the first 6 issues, I'm guessing. And then Chapter 3 would have been those last 6 issues, issues 7 through 12-ish. I'm guessing that's the breakdown, but that's all we get when we actually read the book cover to cover. We basically have Chapter 1, we read the prelude, Chapter 2, which is, again, I'm guessing that first mini-story arc, kind of trade paperback collection, and then Chapter 3 is the final. I will say, in general, I prefer when collections have the covers to each issue before each issue, so that I can read it as a kind of experience I would have had reading the single issues, being like, oh, I'm aware when we're going to the next issue. That being said, this reads really beautifully cover to cover. In fact, I ended up binge reading this the first night I had it. I couldn't put this thing down. I started it and finished it a couple hours later, and I just loved it. I think it was just pure entertainment. I maybe have seen sharper Kirkman work. I think Invincible is just one of the best comic books ever written. I tried to go in with an open mind, and I think that overall, this story really didn't disappoint. So for those like myself that didn't know a ton about this book before reading it, let me just go over some of the basics before I dive into the meat of the storyline. Essentially, this book's prologue starts with this man who's kind of wandering in sort of like the Himalayas or the Alps or some mountain range in Asia, and he ends up kind of like almost passing out along the way, but he finds like the base of this kind of temple area where there's these kind of factions of different monks, this kind of tribe or group that practice this kind of ancient sort of martial arts practice. I think they're the Order of the Flaming Fist, something like that, but it's all based around this kind of belief that there used to be this way to convert the energy in the air into an actual fire or fireball. The leader of this kind of clan or tribe used to be able to do it once long and long ago, but the way to do it has been lost. So ever since then, this whole group of people has tried to keep up this practice in the hopes that they'll find a way back to accessing the firepower. They can heat stuff, like they can heat up their own and steam their own rice with just their hands. They can burn each other by touch. They know a lot of like kind of proficient martial arts disciplines, but none of them is able to actually produce fire or a fireball. But in walks our hero, Owen Johnson, which is such a fun kind of generic name, I thought. It so fits this. I loved it. At any rate, he kind of finds his way to this monastery. He goes there and he gets trained by kind of the master there, and he kind of makes his way. He kind of fits in with the group. He has a rival. People either like him or don't like him. He finds kind of a love interest, though love and passion of that kind is forbidden in this monastery. At any rate, the prelude prologue to the series is all about setting up him in this kind of monastic kind of group of martial arts people, and we kind of have the lore building, world building of what this faction is about. They're basically guarding this room that is supposed to have this dragon, and they need to stop this dragon from ever coming out, and that's kind of the nature of their order. They believe that they're supposed to keep the dragon at bay, never releasing it upon the world because it could bring world-ending destruction. So that's kind of the mission of this faction. We don't know much about Owen Johnson. We basically discover that his motivation is primarily to find out what happened to his parents. He is adopted, and he has a loving family back home, but he's basically just his whole life been trying to find a way back to finding his parents. All he has is a photo. And that's kind of the setup to this book. Now, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail here. We're going to start venturing into spoiler territory. But one of the other things that happens in the prelude is that the people of the monastery, including the leader who becomes kind of his friend and mentor, basically looks at the photo and is shocked to find that the mom, at least, has a tattoo of their sort of rival tribe that's kind of the bad people, air quotes, of this whole mythos, who is trying to unleash and awaken the dragon on the unsuspecting world. And because of that, he kind of says, you might get blackballed. Everyone's seen this photo now, and you're in trouble. And so basically the monastery, everyone in there kind of turns their back on him. His love interest won't even look at him, is kind of shaming him. He's feeling like totally outcasted. He's conflicted because his whole life he's just been trying to find his parents, and now he's been told they're evil people, or they were evil people. In the midst of that, he still continues his training. He kind of pushes through, but ultimately a faction of that rival group shows up with these kind of gnarly zeppelins and just wages an attack on this monastery. And so the end of the prelude is essentially this epic battle between these two factions. There's arrows and swords and all sorts of just gnarly martial arts. It's really amazing. They're trying to defend the dragon. There's this ultimate battle between the teacher of this group and kind of the leader of the evil party, her air quotes evil party. And within that battle, it looks like his sensei is about to get knocked out or killed or whatever. And he heats up and he just launches this giant fireball. And it's basically like, oh, he's the chosen one. Oh, my goodness. Around this time, too, we have him going into the dragon chamber. And other than a puddle of water in a dark room, there doesn't appear to be anything there. At any rate, this fireball happens, and the next thing we know, we have a double spread page basically saying 15 years later, and we have our main character just at a family barbecue in the suburbs. And that's kind of the end of the prelude. At the very, very end, we have a panel of kind of a ninja in a tree by his house, presumably saying, hey, time may have passed, we don't know what's transpired. He seems to be just kind of a suburban dad now, but there's ninjas at his door. And that's the prelude. And may I say, that prelude graphic novel is such a wonderful setup for this series. I do think the kind of Kirkman-esque twist to this first volume, I would say, is really the fact that 15 years later, we have this big time jump, and it really circumvents kind of our expectation of what's about to happen. And then we roll into chapter 2, which begins with issue 1 of Firepower immediately afterwards. We pick up just in that front yard space when he's at the grill, and we basically are introduced to his adopted family, his now wife, his 2 kids, and the kind of happy life he's made for himself. He's kind of like a antique furniture salesman. He has such an unassuming job and identity. His wife is like a super cop, so he feels like, I could think of the perception or optics or that he's a little bit emasculated, but we know he's this like legendary fighter and a chosen one. The more we go into it, the more we find that his wife seems to know just about everything about his past, which was cool to see. We find out that he's actually trained her to be kind of combat proficient beyond what she gets as just being a police officer. His kids don't know much about his past at all. They don't know about any of the stuff that happened with the martial arts training. And we just have him at a barbecue. And before long, we have his old rival who he actually ended up befriending. He shows up and basically says, our clan needs you. There's some dangerous things happening in the world, and you're needed. You're like the chosen one. You have the firepower. And he says something like, I'm not going back with you. I didn't kill this girl, and, I don't trust the guy in charge. I think he did it. And so we don't know what happened, but presumably his love interest from the prelude has died. He's been blamed for her murder. His sensei is not the one in charge anymore. His sensei didn't stand up for him. And at some point he left this whole order and life behind him to carve out a new, very suburban kind of lifestyle. And so now he's kind of awakened. He's thrust back into this world. Before long, he basically has ninjas at his door. We have this great sequence where he's basically fighting off this whole group of ninjas who have made their way and done a home invasion, but he's trying not to cause any noise as they go through all of his family's rooms while they sleep, and it's just this epic silent battle, and it is absolutely phenomenal. We find out that they were sent by his own tribe, and it was kind of a test or trial, and we see he definitely still has it. He definitely still has access to the firepower, but he still kind of denies going in. At any rate, his wife finds him after this battle. She says, oh my gosh, is it these bad guys? So we know that she knows what's going on, and it eventually leads into just all of these interesting conflicts. The next several issues are kind of in suburbia. We just have him living his life, but his past is just really at his door. Throughout these early issues as well, we have a really great subplot between the husband and wife where you really feel the presence of his old lover who has passed away. It's the implication that he never stopped loving her, even as he began to love his now wife. And so it's almost like there's this third wheel in their marriage, and there's still tension to this day, even though she's dead. And so every time she comes up or he's thinking about her, it kind of puts a wedge in his marriage. This is obviously a hard dynamic, but it leads to some great character moments, interactions. Everything felt very authentic and true. When they have a kind of conflict about that, he even asks her out on a date to kind of clear the air and reconnect with her, kind of just say how much his marriage means, and sort of like, I was a boy kind of in puppy love, but she wasn't with me when I had my first child. She wasn't with me with all this stuff, and we just see him profess his real, just ardent love for his wife. Really beautiful to see. His date is crashed by some of these bad kind of martial arts guys from this rival tribe. We get all of these epic battles. This kind of culminates into kind of the next big plot bit, which is that his old sensei is still alive. He shows up basically saying, I have a lot to tell you. We find out that one of his new disciples is actually his wife's partner on the police force, so he's like this undercover sleeper agent working for these ninja factions. So we see all these embedded kind of ninjas or martial artists in his suburban life. Really, really fascinating. We find out his sensei is now working for that other faction. He has the tattoo, which of course infuriates our protagonist Owen, who thinks that this guy's been betrayed. Maybe he's the reason this girl died. Why didn't you believe me? This leads to the next big revelation in this book, which is that the faction that they were, the kind of flaming fist people, are actually the bad guys. We find out that their founders were actually in charge of keeping this dragon only so that they could basically unleash it at a later time, never kill it, just always keep it as kind of a threat or something. And that rival faction that we thought was evil is actually the remnant of the good people who are trying to kill the dragon so it never poses a risk on the world again. Owen, of course, thinks it's a little bit ridiculous because he doesn't think this dragon is real at all. And I think that this leads to just some great developments in the plot. At this point, we have full-on just ninja versus ninja battles. We have him trying to escape with his life from his own house and neighborhood. His children are endangered. We have a faction breaking off to kind of fight them and try to kidnap them. This leads to a family meeting where the kids are shocked to uncover the revelations that he is part of this martial arts group. He has this power, and the world is a lot stranger than they realized. At this point, they go on the run, and it's basically suggested that they need to team up with that once-thought evil faction to basically get ready and try to stop the other faction. And this leads into that chapter 3. We have the culmination of all of these just epic battles. There are a couple other twists and turns that I probably won't review at this moment. There is a lot to this here, but basically this all leads to kind of a, air quotes, final battle between these two factions. We have some people in place that haven't been seen in a long time, and it's just really epic. We get to see the firepower used. They go back to the place of that monastery and have this battle. Some of the old people there try to sway the people that have been indoctrinated by this monastic group, basically saying, hey, these are the bad guys, we're the good guys, you remember us. And it kind of succeeds to varying degrees. The new person in charge there, we find out, has known the truth all along. We find out that the sensei just didn't know what was going on once he found out he defected. Anyway, it's just a really, really great read. One of the last twists in the book, we find out that his love interest, who was thought to have been murdered, is actually still alive this whole time, which of course heats up the conflict for all of us readers. And the book ends with them basically stopping that faction for now, but there's another threat looming on the horizon, this one having to do with kind of snake people. I guess TBD on that one for book 2, but the first arc of this book is all presented here between that prelude and those first 12 issues, and it was so much fun. I think story-wise, my only complaint is that it is a bit archetypal or generic in some ways. This feels like a very tried and true kind of Eastern martial arts chosen one kind of storytelling. We have the reluctant hero archetypes in here, but if you can get beyond that, the kind of feeling like you're treading on familiar soil, I think it's still such a fun storyline. And I think that what sets it apart is, one, the incredible character work from Kirkman. He has his craft just honed to just masterful precision. All the characters feel authentic, real, new, and I think that all the character dynamics is really what sold me on this book overall. I enjoy all the primary cast of the characters in this book, and I think that that is what's going to keep me coming back again and again for these adventures. The other selling point for this book is, of course, the incredible art from Chris Samnee. I can't believe I've gone this long without talking about it. The art is just stunning. I know Samnee from the Mark Waid era of Daredevil. I love, love, love his style. There is a kind of animated look to it, a kind of sparse facial detail sort of look, but it is all just so striking. I think the coloring as well is so just wonderful and beautiful. We have so many warm and cool color palette contrasts throughout this book. We have kind of onomata poetic word bubble explosions and things like bam, wham, kind of like the old Batman works. We have stuff like that throughout this book. I think artistically it is just gorgeous. We have so much panel experimentation, splash pages, a really beautiful handful of 2-page spreads that you've seen throughout this video. It's just jaw-dropping. We have whole sections of issues that are all silent too, and we just see action, and I think it just sells it on that stuff alone. The art is just top-notch, absolutely a selling point for a real powerhouse collection here. I really, really enjoyed this. Like I said, other than kind of feeling like it's a little formulaic or generic, I think that this is still a very fun read. If you're a fan of kind of martial arts, kung fu sort of genre storytelling, you got to pick up this book. I think if you're a fan of Robert Kirkman, so far I'd say this isn't one of his top tier reads like Invincible or The Walking Dead for me, but it's definitely in that top tier. I think in the top category, it's in the top half of his stuff. I think it's definitely worth reading as a Kirkman fan like myself. If not for any of these other reasons, the Chris Samnee art alone is just jaw-dropping. If you're a fan of the comic book medium, it's hard not to appreciate the art presented in this book. I do think the oversized format is a nice touch. I think I still would have preferred to see a dust jacket on this bad boy, but it's still really well constructed. I think it has a really sleek look to it. I know for me, I'm definitely interested in coming back for a future book 2. At the end of the book here, you've seen a handful of extras these last few pages. We have some great behind the scenes, just stuff here. We have some production images, some writings, character models. Before getting all of the cover art we have for this book, like I said, I would have wished to have this interspersed throughout the book itself, but I think saving it for the back was definitely not a huge miss for me. As long as we still have them reproduced, I really like seeing it, and I think it did leave that reading experience really, really bingeable. I felt like I just flew through this because I didn't have some of those demarcations. Good stuff. And now all that's left is to give Firepower Book 1 hardcover a grade. For a wonderful, albeit slightly formulaic, Kung Fu Chosen One story depicted with gorgeous artwork from the incredible Chris Samnee, the Comic Book Report is happy to give Firepower Book 1 hardcover a B+. This is still in the upper echelon for Kirkman work for me. I really, really loved it. I don't know that it quite had the power of like an Invincible right out of the gate, but there were still plenty of fun twists and turns, but I think this is such a fun, character-grounded series. Pure entertainment value here for me. Would recommend it for comic fans out there, particularly if you like martial arts, genres, and just a good character-driven story. A really fun piece here. I'm so happy I picked it up. I love this oversized format. Even if we didn't get a dust jacket, we'll definitely keep a lookout for future volumes in this line. But let me know what you think about Firepower in the comments, and until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to leave a like, and maybe check out some of my other videos on your way out. Until next time, have a good one.